I'm Jeanne Sinclair, and I work in the Faculty of Education at Memorial University. I'm also the newsletter editor for our AERA Special Interest Group, Research in Reading and Literacy. Today, I'm delighted to speak with Elfrieda Freddy Hiebert, who is President and CEO of TextProject. TextProject provides open access reading and literacy resources for teachers. Freddy's research addresses how fluency, vocabulary, and knowledge are fostered through text, and she has been recognized through awards such as the William S. Gray Citation of Merit from the International Literacy Association. Freddy has a rich background and many awards and accolades, too many to list here. We are excited to hear about her current work in text generation and how it connects to her 2026 Distinguished Scholar Talk for the Research in Reading and Literacy SIG at AERA's conference in April. Click the link to learn more about our group, and you can also find us on Blue Sky and LinkedIn. Hi, Freddy. It's great to see you today. I'm so glad you decided to chat about your current work. How are you?
I'm doing great, and I'm very honored that I get to speak to the SIG. AERA is in my state, which I'm thrilled about as well. So
we're coming to California. Very exciting. Wonderful. So I have a couple questions for you about your current work, which is really exciting. And I'm wondering if you could tell us a bit first about TextProject.
Yeah, we started TextProject about 25 years ago, and it's a family-run foundation. So that means my family and I fund the foundation, and our intent is to make accessible and appropriate text available for kids, for teachers to use. So everything's digital at TextProject. People can print it. I mean, they're in downloadable forms, but our intent is to provide educators with supplemental text for kids to read and also vocabulary resources. So for example, there's a whole set of pictures that accompany core vocabulary. So if you think of the 2,500 most common morphological families, we've got pictures of those words in those families, the root word or the keyword, in semantic clusters. So that's one of the things I'm really interested in, not just morphology, but also the semantic clusters within which words live. Yeah, I think we haven't really been doing enough with that. And one of the things that I'm finding is that AI is just a really great source for teachers to identify semantic grids or gradients that they can then have their kids work on. So I'm not saying the kids go online to do that, but the teachers can get some additional information on what words are in a cluster, which I think is really important.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the semantic clusters or the gradients?
Yeah, we have a really big lexicon in English because of our varied etymological history. So we start out as a Germanic language, then we add French, Latin, and then we put some Greek on top of that. And as a result, we've often got, a plethora of words that authors can choose from in their writing. And it's really the case in narrative writing that authors make a lot of varied choices. So, typically narrative text can have more rare words than informational text because the words are repeated in informational text. So what I'm interested in is supporting kids in understanding that an author of a story isn't going to keep repeating the same word to describe a character's traits or to describe a character's movement or even the features of the context that are really important for the obstacles, problems in the story. So what I do when I generate these semantic gradients is actually ask the AI to pick, like, let's say we used a word like lackadaisical. I ask AI to choose some words that whatever level I'm working with, like say like a 7th grader who isn't a very enthusiastic reader, to
They might
find
be
some
lackadaisical.
to find some words that that student likely knows around that concept. So what I'm working on is to show students that there's this range of words. Now, they don't all mean exactly the same, and they're used in slightly nuanced contexts, but you have a basic idea here. But there's this whole group of words you're learning about. And I think it's really critical to let our kids know that, there's no way we're ever going to teach you all the English words. But there are these strategies that we can support you with to let you know that, in fact, you know some base words that will actually give you access to the meanings of some more complex words.
Wow, that seems extremely helpful for students who encounter unknown words in text. How did you decide to start TextProject?
How did I decide to start TextProject? Well, I myself am the child of refugees to North America, actually to Canada. And public education has been very, very, very good to me. And I wanted to give something back. And that's why, I also wanted to model for educators, for researchers, and also for publishers what some good evidence-based prototypes for vocabulary and for text are. So I'll do a research study, and then I'll actually generate some text that exemplify what some of the findings are. So one of the things that I'm really concerned about, and I don't know if it's the case in Canada, but certainly in the United States, if kids spend very little time during the class day reading, that means that their automaticity isn't going to be great. So I've done a lot of research on automaticity and have designed texts that are intended to support students with the words that occur most frequently and moderately frequently. And those are typically general academic words. Okay. But we're not doing that in isolation. We're doing it in the context of text. And keep remembering we're emphasizing morphological families, but we're also emphasizing semantic families.
Mm-hmm.
So they aren't, like Dick and Jane kinds of texts, like run, run, run. They're texts that give students the opportunity to see new, varied, rare words, but not at the rate at which you'd usually see them in a textbook or in a narrative story. The texts, I think, are interesting. I mean, because they're aimed also to create background knowledge. And for example, let me tell you about something I recently learned. I just thought this was really interesting. I've been trying to write background knowledge builders for certain stories that students might have in their classes. And in this one unit that I was working with, kids were reading things about the Dust Bowl, which is kind of a hard thing, perhaps, for some kids to understand. Because even if you live in the Midwest of Canada and the US, changes were made after the 1930s to prevent the same kinds of things happening again.
Right.
For example, when you look at pictures in the 1930s of like Oklahoma or the parts of Kansas that were really hit, there aren't any trees. So they didn't know about windshields, trees providing windshields.
Right.
So what I discovered, so I'm always looking for interesting information. Like I'll ask questions like, why we still have dust storms, but why don't they cause the damage that happened in the 1930s? And it turns out the U.S. Department of Agriculture actually started some of the, the offices at different land grant universities to actually solve some of those problems. But one of the things that I found out is I was wondering why, Steinbeck wrote Grapes of Wrath. So why did so many of the folks from that area come to California? Well, it turned out there was some advertising from California, but there's also a really big fruit and vegetable industry in Florida, which was maybe even, pretty close for some of them.
Right.
Well, it turned out that there was only one paved highway
Huh.
out of that area of the Midwest, and that was Route 66.
Oh, interesting.
And it went to California.
Right. So
And the
easy
road
decision.
to, yeah, and the road to Florida actually was gravel or dirt. I don't
Oh.
even think it was gravel.
Hmm.
So it was a
Hmm.
dirt road. So, I mean, it was so much easier to travel on this, highway.
Yeah.
We didn't have the freeways in the United States till the 1950s.
Yeah.
That didn't come about till then. But what I'm saying is, I write texts that are going to be intriguing,
Hmm. Hmm.
including to me. So when I put something up there, it still has to be interesting, and
Yeah.
so they're not trivial kinds of things. Yeah.
Well, I think that's really special to your work is addressing engagement, motivation, background knowledge, vocabulary, morphology, and fluency and
Automaticity.
automaticity,
Yeah.
right? So like I have my hands up here. I don't know if you can see them, but that's a lot to integrate and have on offer for free to teachers around the country, I guess around the world. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it is really something that can be used. I mean, there are lots of people learning English in different places, right?
Hmm.
And one of the things I want to underscore about these texts that we've written, which I find can be very different than some of the so-called evidence-based interventions where they offer fluency texts, is that I look, and I have obviously some people who support me in this, but I look for the best possible engaging pictures.
Right.
Because, and please don't think it's because I think that kids need to read pictures, as we had a reading strategy here in the States for some time. But what I'm interested in is really engaging kids. And so, yeah, we have some pretty, I think, some pretty cool pictures. And in our latest product, which is called Story Labs, which are for adolescents, I've actually been making the covers with AI.
Hmm.
And I think there's some pretty cool covers. And sometimes some of the pictures, like for Frankenstein, the cover I really liked, and I didn't have to do a lot of inquiry to get it to look like that. And then the clip, we in all the story labs, it'll be about a classic or another well-known book that kids might be reading now. And what I do is take a short passage, which under the kind of free, well, I forgot what it's called now, but you're allowed to do that if it's for educational purposes
Right. Hmm.
within a certain limited range. But when the monster actually appears, Frankenstein has fled the lab, and the monster appears. There's a really great picture that AI created for me. So it's fun, and but I think it's also really intended to support students in getting interested in what text has to offer.
Oh,
Uh,
absolutely. And, the emphasis we've seen in recent years and decades on worksheets as our, the instructional materials that we use, reading passages on worksheets, it's just not, it can't nearly be as engaging as having an actual book.
yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Mm.
And you know, sometimes I actually print some of these books out, which is what I'm doing for a project I'm going to be working on this winter, this coming winter in 2026. Um, so it's possible for teachers, although to get them in color, I know that that's pricey.
Hmm.
But the text that we have, they're click-through kinds of things. So
Hmm.
I think it can be engaging for kids,
Oh,
but it
absolutely.
invites them into the story labs, invites them into reading. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. So who would you say is your audience for TextProject more generally, your website?
The people I'm really, really interested in partnering with are actually teacher educators.
And why is that?
I think that we have a real responsibility to help those individuals who are going out to serve our children, our young people. We need to provide them with enough resources, but also with a real understanding of how English works and also how texts work. So when I started actually doing some of my research on vocabulary 25 years ago when I would talk about, the three contributing languages, primary contributing languages to English. I was surprised at how little of that practicing teachers actually knew. So my real interest is that we uncover some things for teachers and that they uncover those things for their students.
Mm.
So for example, this business of the morphological roots of English, at TextProject, I actually have a picture that tells the story of English in one image.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I hope that, every kid could actually see that picture from
Mm.
third grade on. And what it is, it's a bratwurst. So English starts out, as a bratwurst, that's German, and ways in which we make new words in English with that layer of language is we do a lot of compounding.
Mm.
So, when we have something new come into our lives, a lot of it's with compounding, like mouse pad. We take existing words and do something new with them, right?
Mm.
Then inside the, excuse me, so we've got a bratwurst and then it's in a baguette.
Okay.
Okay, so the
Great.
French come and then we get some, bread would be the German word braut, but, baguette, something a little bit fancier and more multisyllabic. And then there's some Greek yogurt sprinkled on top of the bratwurst that is in the baguette. So there you've got the story of English.
Oh, that's amazing. I'm gonna have to check this out.
I mean, I think it's an easy way to explain it to kids too, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and English, well, I mean, linguistics is a beautiful field and there's so much to learn. And I think that when teachers can name it and talk about it, they can become more effective teachers of language and literacy, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, last question for you. So what, for the audience listening, what would you say is the most important takeaway that you've learned about adolescent reading, since we've talked today about Story Labs, your project for adolescent readers? What's the most important takeaway for supporting adolescent readers who might have difficulties?
What I'm interested in always is starting out with what the kids already know. So I think, and my title for the AERA talk says something about the national assessment and below basic readers. I think that in the US, we've just been in a remarkable downward spiral of describing our adolescents. And it comes across, and you can find some of these headlines, like when the NAEP results come out, and even like in the New York Times and on NPR, everywhere they're saying, we've got kids who can't read or aren't on grade level, and those are really inaccurate ways to describe kids. In actual fact, we don't know what the eighth graders in the 2024 results know. Tell us that. It's based on a Roche model scale, and we just know that the below basic kids didn't have certain proficiencies that were a certain cut point.
Right.
So what I'm interested in, so in this high school project that I'm working on in the next semester, is I asked to see data on what the kids can do.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty good at predicting what vocabulary they're probably going to have some problems with. But what I focus on with teachers is if 94 to 95% of the words come from 2,200, 2,500 morphological families. Okay. How
Mm-hmm.
are your kids doing that? And do the kids actually even know that there is this powerful group of words that you actually know?
Right.
Most of them know those words, but they haven't read enough to get automatic with the words that are at the top end of the medium frequency band, which
Right.
means that when they see really low frequency or rare words, they're stymied. You can only take so and so much of a diet of low frequency and rare words where it becomes meaningless.
Right.
And you also don't want to try.
Yeah.
So to me, the most important thing that I would say to my colleagues in the research community is I think it's time we found out what these kids can do and then build on that.
Mm.
And when somebody tells me, I don't know what instructional levels are anymore, and I don't mean leveling like in the book leveling. I mean, when people say, this kid is at third grade level. I don't know what that means because our books are no longer controlled by vocabulary. We do know that those 2,500 morphological families are going to be prominent, but we don't know what the words that are topping off the menu, right? That are also in the text. So yeah, that's my message is I just am so tired of hearing our kids described from the vantage point of a test where we're not informed of anything that the kids know or don't know. And then we start with the assumption that we have to start from ground zero.
Right.
And actually, if you're at 8th grade level or at 4th grade level on the NAEP, and even the kids at the 10th percentile are getting about 93-94% accurate by 8th grade, that means you can read the low frequency and medium frequency words, maybe not as fast as you should, but you're having trouble with the other words. And what are the other words? Most of those are multisyllabic words.
Right.
Most of those come from the French or Greek layers of English. And I think that, and I'm not suggesting we teach them, to memorize all the prefixes and suffixes. And, I'm saying that they need to have some strategies for figuring out morphologically complex words. I think so. It really changes the way in which we do an intervention. So rather than starting with, some of these interventions start by teaching the kids all the phonemes all over it, like with a 15-year-old, doesn't need that, but does need to see a whole bunch of interesting text,
Right. Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying to do at TextProject. Keep remembering, I don't create reading programs. What I do is I create these supplemental texts to give kids experience with background knowledge, vocabulary, automaticity, something to think about.
Yes, such an interesting approach. And I think, very akin to how we learn language and sort of the semantic clusters and the way that our brain does identify words that have similar meanings, right? As one way that we sort of have collections of vocabulary in our heads. And not that common of an approach, but, it seems very high leverage. So I really look forward to reading more about your work and hearing your talk at the conference in Los Angeles in April. Very excited. And thank you so much, Freddy, for your time today. I've learned a lot.
Well, thank you for giving me this opportunity. Really appreciate it.